Hello and welcome to another What Sold on eBay video. I'm your host Chris, the Thrift Shop Hustler. Definitely go down there and click the subscribe button if you're new to the channel and you want to learn different items to sell on eBay that are worth good money. We're going to go over some items today in this video. So like I said, if you're new, definitely go down there, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so you get notified anytime a helpful video comes out. Let's get right into it. I know it's been a little bit of a while since I've done one of these videos, and I'm happy to get back into the swing of things, so you definitely want to go down there and subscribe if you're new to the channel. So let's go start off with this first item here. This is a Maui Jim white cap sunglasses. We did take a best offer for $75 on these glasses. Now, one of the things about glasses, or sunglasses I should say, you need to be aware that there's a lot of fakes out there. So usually you can just usually tell by the quality. As you can see here, everything looks pretty much legit. And I didn't know that Maui Jim actually had sunglasses. They're known for their t-shirts and their Hawaiian typed items like that. But some of their glasses actually good, or some of their sunglasses actually go for a pretty good amount of money. And of course, with sunglasses, like I said, one of the major things is just to make sure that they're not fake. There's a lot of reproduction, or I should say bootleg sunglasses out there, and usually you can tell by the quality. I think from my experience, Oakley's are probably the most counterfeited item that I've come across in my journey. And I know I've seen Ray-Bans and things like that, but for some reason, Oakley's were just made in crazy amounts of bootleg, counterfeit, whatever you want to say. And usually it's the quality. You know, the plastics will be a little bit heavier on the legitimate stuff. The things that are printed on the side here usually very well done. You know, some of them are printed on, some of them are stamped in there. Just one of those things, but just to look out for Maui Jim sunglasses. You might not have realized that this brand makes sunglasses, and they actually go for a pretty good amount of money. So this is definitely a Bolo brand to look out for. Next up, we have this vintage Aurora Olympic size Skittle bowl. This is complete, as you can see here, from 1971. Aurora might be a name that, if you're in the collector's world, that you're very familiar with, and we'll get into that in just a second. But as you can see here, all the different pieces, and to be honest, like, this is a really good find, especially finding these boxes in such amazing shape. That's going to be one of the hardest things to do. As you can see here, there's a little bit of dentage in that bottom corner, but I mean, just the graphics alone, a lot of this stuff usually just is torn apart. You know, these things sit in garages, and as you can see, it's got some water damage or some age. It looks like, you know, this instruction sheet at some point got a little bit of water on it. And that's pretty common to things that are put into garages. And as you can see here, this thing is just amazing condition. This sold for $59.99, and all the little pieces are in there. And just an amazing shape, to be honest. Like, finding these things in boxes alone is incredible. As you can see here, this box has been very well kept. And I will say, some of these older games, especially Aurora stuff, and we'll get into that in just a second. We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive if you've never heard of Aurora. It's a vintage company. And, you know, sometimes just really good boxes will add 3 or 4 times the value to a certain item just for having a really good condition box. So that goes for a lot of collectibles. So, you know, usually you can add a little bit of a premium onto these collectibles, especially if the box is in really good condition. And other than the fact that you know, it does have some kind of image loss, which is understandable, but that dent in the corner is a little bit of bummer, especially considering that this thing is in such good condition for the age. And that little ding in the corner definitely is not great, but, you know, overall this thing is in pretty good condition. So a little bit of a dive. If you've never heard of Aurora, Aurora's been around for a while. I don't know, I don't think they still make stuff, but they're most known for their plastic model kits. As we can see here, some of the monster ones go for thousands of dollars, especially if you can find them in the boxes, some of them brand new. We can see some of the original art up there. It went for a pretty crazy amount of money. But as you can see here, Aurora, if you ever see that name, Aurora, and it's any kind of model kit, definitely take another look. Like I said, the sci-fi stuff and the monsters, the universal monsters, go for the most money. But Aurora's been doing stuff for a long time. Um, and as you can see here, finding that stuff, even there's airplanes and cars and things like that, those things still go for a pretty good amount of money. But so anyways, just if you see Aurora, that name, and it's a model kit, definitely take another look, especially if it's universal monsters. If you can find some of those in really good condition. I mean, look at this. Look at this one. This was a whole collection, as you can see here, and just keep an eye out for those. Next up, we have this antique New Point 14 karat gold ink pen. Now, I don't think this is actually solid gold 14 karat. A lot of these pens are going to be gold filled, and that cuts down on cost. Don't get me wrong, there are solid 14 karat gold pins out there, so just be aware of that. But most of the time, if it says 14 karat, it's usually going to be, it's going to usually say like GF or like, what is it, GEF or like gold or GEP, gold electroplate, which is basically a fancy term for gold plated. They use like magnets and stuff like that to apply it's like it's like usually, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but it's a fancy way to plate, metals using electricity and magnets. So anyways, like I said, definitely check out these pins. Sometimes actually these gold, the nibs, which are basically the little pointy metal part on the end that the ink comes out of. Well, actually, ink doesn't come out of that. Ink flows into this little thing, and then you basically write with it. But the nibs, the little tips, sometimes those are actually solid gold. So definitely look out for that. They don't weigh much, but sometimes that'll add an extreme amount of value to this. Actually, you could see. So like my point exactly here. The nib on this is 14 karat gold. I can't see the marking, and I didn't list this, so I can't tell you whether or not it's solid gold. But usually, the nibs, if they're gold, they're going to be solid. They don't usually do gold-filled nibs because they don't really weigh that much. Usually, the gold filling is going to be, or the gold plating and the gold filling will be on these pins, and usually they'll be marked on the side or on the ends here, right here on the end. So, I mean, just look for fancy pins. If you go to garage sales, you'll see sometimes they have junk drawer kind of bins, just laying out there with a bunch of keys and, knickknacks that, the old, good old kitchen catch-all drawer. Sometimes people just pull that drawer out and just dump it on a table or just set the whole drawer on a table. And these pins are notoriously found in those kind of rummage kind of things. So if you go to a garage sale and you see a bunch of pins and just junk in like a thing, just dig through it. You never know what you're going to find. But anyways, these older nib pens, definitely look out for those. And like I said, as you can see, it says New Point 14 karat. I can't see the other piece if this is gold filled or not. But like I said, you don't really find gold filled tips. They're usually solid gold. And they don't weigh much, but like I said, you couldn't really sell it for the actual gold. You could sell the nibs, to be honest, but it's just better just to sell the whole thing together, even if it doesn't work. As you can see here, this is an old style pin, fountain pen, and see here, it did come with a box, but definitely look out for this kind of stuff. Speaking of pins, this is actually a good thing that came up. Is Cross is another great vintage company. They do a lot of ballpoint pins, though. I've seen some Cross fountain pins. As you can see here, it's like a ballpoint, and you can definitely tell the difference. And usually, there's going to be info right on in the center part where the cap usually comes off, or the center part right there where the actual pin, you could see some engraving. So most of your information on a Cross is going to be in there, usually in the middle. It's rarely on the ends, though. Some of the vintage pins will have some, like, it'll say gold filled or whatever. But Cross is another bolo brand to look out for. I've came across Cross. That's a good one. I've came across Cross. Wow, that's like a tongue twister right there. Pins a lot, so they're out there, and usually, there's some of them that aren't worth that much, but there are some gold-filled ones. And with the company Cross, there are some solid gold pins out there, so just look out for those. They're pretty good money usually. If you find them at garage sales and thrift stores, they're usually relatively cheap because people don't really know to look into these things. They just think they're regular pins, and for the most part, a lot of employees and people that work at thrift stores and people that are in garage sales, unless they, own the pin and bought it brand new, they don't realize that some of these pins are solid gold, and some of them are worth thousands of dollars, and they're out there. So you can definitely get lucky, especially watching these videos. As a matter of fact, we had a. I wish I could make a video on this, because the one of the viewers found a $500 item, and I can't talk about it. I wanted to do a video on it, but they wanted to stay anonymous, and so they did find a $500 item watching one of these videos. So congratulations! I thought that was really cool, and it was just one of those bolo videos. So stuff's out there. There's lots of treasures out there. But the bottom line is to definitely look out for these different types of pins and just kind of get familiar with them, especially if you've never dealt in the world of pins. People buy them even if they don't work. 50% of the time, these older pins aren't going to just work without new ink. Usually the ink dries out. So it's just one of those things to look out for sure. Next up, we have this vintage Canon lens. This isn't really one of the newer EF lenses, electronic lenses. This is one of the older ones from the 70s or for the 80s. Lens made in Japan. This is a prime lens, which means it's a fixed lens. As you can see here, it's fixed at 50 millimeters. So 1.4 f. And if you don't know any of that jargon, don't worry about it. Some of the 50 millimeters come standard with a lot of, even today, a 50 millimeter lens is usually a standard fixed lens that some of the higher end cameras come with, though, or prime lens, I should say. Actually, you know what? A lot of the consumer ones actually come with the variable lenses. I think it's like, what is it, 87? It's like 50 something through 87, basically, so you can zoom. Well, you know what? I'm not even getting into the technical aspects of this lens. Just know it's not a zoom lens. If it's a fixed lens, if it's got one of these millimeter numbers, it's a prime fixed lens. It means that you have to manually move forward and backwards to get the zoom, to get the zoom, but the focus, there's a focus ring on there. Anyways, I'm kind of sidetracking everyone with the important information here. The main thing I want to say is that these vintage lenses sometimes are worth more than the vintage cameras. As a matter of fact, you're going to find that to be the case a lot of the times. You're going to come across vintage cameras. We come across vintage cameras all the time, and what I mean by vintage cameras are 35 millimeter film, not digital. You're going to come across these types of lenses. They're very easy to look up. So like if you ever come across this one, this is a Canon lens FD 50 millimeter 1.4. You could put in the SSC, and you'll get a price on this for sure. And like I said, we sold this. I want to say we took a best offer for $60 on this lens, and it's kind of like some of these vintage cameras, you can find them for super cheap, but the lenses are the stuff that's worth the money. And there's a lot of great lenses out there that are worth thousands of dollars. So just be aware that sometimes, actually most of the time, the lenses are worth more than the vintage cameras, unless you get a very specific camera that's very sought after. And some of those lenses are actually fixed to those really high-end cameras. You really can't change out the lenses. And so this is basically a standard stock lens, and there's different types of brands. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's like there's a higher end version of this lens. So this would be like if you were to get an entry level camera, this is an entry level lens. And there's some different lenses. I want to say like what is it? The Nikon one. I forget what the brand is called. I think it's Nikon, but there's another lens that is like a 50 millimeter that actually goes for 3 times this amount. And those are like the higher end cameras. So just like buying a car, there's different brands, or there's different like luxury brands. This is the standard Canon FD 50 millimeter lens that came with most cameras. Another kind of pro tip I can give you is the f-stop number. This is a 1.4. That's very, very good. The lower that number, usually the higher priced lens, so like 1.4. The normal kind of standard one is 2.8. But the lower that number goes, the more light is let in. So basically, if you're a photographer that likes taking photos in nighttime or dusk, or anything where there's low light conditions, the lower that number is, the better the lens is going to be as far as low light conditions. And so 1.4 is a pretty low one. As a matter of fact, there are adapters, so people can take this old lens, put an adapter on, and then put it on their newer cameras. That's why actually these lenses sell for a good amount of money, because there is a market for these older lenses. Though they don't just clip right onto a new camera, you have to have an adapter. So there is a market for these. And anyways, I think I went too long-winded on this. Eventually, I'll do a camera video. I know a pretty good amount about the different things to look out for. So at some point, I will do a video on that. Next up, we have this vintage cottage cheese Hermanson Brothers pink depression glass. I can't believe that they actually put cottage cheese in something like this. But then again, the 50s were a time where there was mass production of things in glass. The fact that someone went through all the trouble just to fill, all the trouble to create a piece of glass and this piece of metal to house 10 ounces of cottage cheese, and that just goes to show you about the consumerism and kind of the environmental impact we have on certain things today. Today cottage cheese comes in recyclable plastic tubs, but it's kind of crazy to think that 10 ounces of cottage cheese came in this huge kind of crazy glass thing. Even though glass can get recycled, it's a crazy process as far as like melting down. It takes an extreme amount of energy to melt down glass for recycling. But anyways, I kind of go on a little bit of sidetrack there. And anyways, you can see usually you don't find these tops, which is very nice. As a matter of fact, this actually might not even go with this glass. It could have been another top or another piece of glass, but this was all together, so I'm assuming this was all in one piece. I wasn't alive or did much research on this particular thing to tell you if this depression glass went with that and with all that. And especially if you want to get into different types of glass, definitely research depression glass. It's a very interesting subject, as you can see here. But anyways, this sold for $38.98 for a piece of glass. I think the value actually comes in the fact that the lid is still here. Usually you don't find these with the lids and any of the kind of markings and things. I mean, the lid's in pretty good... the lid's in decent shape. I mean, it's got, some dings and some dents and things like that. But I think, to be honest, that's what adds the most value as far as this whole piece. Because if you just had this piece of depression glass, you pretty much wouldn't even know what this thing went to. Especially, does it go at a set of 4, a set of 8? You don't know, but having this lid does a lot to the value. And like I said, I'm not very versed in this particular product, so I don't even know if this thing goes with this. But anyways, it's one of those things to look out for. Next up, we have this vintage emerald ring, and this is 18 karat gold. We've talked about rings before in the past. Definitely just to make sure that they're what they say they are, marked. Sometimes they'll be marked 14K, and then they're 14 karat, they're 14K gold filled or plated, and that's like a huge difference. I highly suggest anyone that's serious into reselling, definitely get an acid kit. They're a little, I don't want to say they're super dangerous, but you deal with acid and chemicals, so you just got to be careful on what you're using and what you're doing, being in a well ventilated area. There's tons of videos on that stuff, so I'm not going to go into depth. And maybe one day, I've been asked to do a acid test video, but there's so many of them out there. Like, you can definitely find them. But anyways, this is a nice ring. You can see here. I want to say we took a best offer for 300 and something on this. As you can see here, we had this as high as 500, and that's another thing about jewelry that's hard to determine. It's easy to determine value on like a solid piece of gold because you basically know what if it's 14 karat, 18 karat, 24 karat. You can basically weigh it and see what it's worth versus the price of gold. But when you start to deal with like stones and emeralds and like different kind of diamonds that are placed in these, sometimes it adds a great amount to the value of the ring, and sometimes it really doesn't. A lot of these stones, they don't demand the money that they used to, especially diamonds, because because I can go into a whole thing about the lab created diamonds and things like that. I'm not talking about CZ, cubic zirconian. I'm talking about actually lab created diamonds that are pretty much like real diamonds created in the lab, and they're very hard to detect. As far as like when you use those detectors, they come up as legitimate diamonds, and that's a whole subject in itself. But for the most part, the metal is where the money's at in these rings. And so this is actually a really cool emerald ring. So definitely look out for that kind of stuff. I mean, this stuff's out there. Sometimes you can find these at garage sales. People don't know what they have, especially if the markings, sometimes the markings aren't, they're kind of rubbed off from age. One of the pro tips I can give you without even having to use a magnet, and that's another good thing to have with you, is a high-powered magnet. If any of these kind of rings or anything stick to a high-powered magnet, that's not going to be solid gold or solid silver. And so, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But anyways, definitely look out for this kind of stuff if they're out there. Next up, we have this TNR booty. This is a booty. I want to say booty. That's probably not even how you say it. It's like probably bote or something like that. This is a terrine with ladle. Usually terrines are basically kind of these vessels that are, they hold soup in them. As you can see here, they're usually rectangle in kind of shape. Well, I mean, it's kind of like an oval shape, but I mean, it's not square. These things are usually kind of rectangularly, ovally in shape, as you can see here. Usually they come in 3 pieces. There's a top, there's the base, and then there's the ladle. And usually the ladle is the thing that's missing. You'd think the top would be missing the most, but the ladle, sometimes it's missing. And some of these actually go for a pretty crazy amount of money, the different kind of antique ones. This one went for $50. I don't really like selling these unless they're worth a lot of money, because they're not super hard to ship, but it comes back down to like, glass and shipping that, how comfortable you are with shipping glass is. If you bought this for $5, do you want to take all the time to list it and sell it for $50? Or, it's all your preference. For me personally, I try to stay away from this kind of stuff unless it's like really, really good money. For like maybe a $20 profit, I'm not going to waste all my time doing something like this. But I will say there are some terrines that are worth a crazy amount of money, especially some of the solid silver ones. There are some Chinese exports and some Asian ceramic ones that are worth crazy amounts of money, as you can see here. These Dottie Thayer cabbage ones, those things go for a crazy amount of money. There's some like weird like animal shaped ones, like here's a crab one I was talking about, like these kind of weird animal shaped ones. Lettuce, there's another lettuce one, there's another Thayer cabbage, and as you can see here, some of these things you would think, oh, it's just like a normal thing. There's another lobster one. So this is basically like what different terrines look like. They've been making these for hundreds of years. There's all different types of shapes and sizes and themes. And as you can see here, this is a Vermeil Rose pattern. Some of the here's a common one that you would see in like England. It's kind of like got the the Asian inspired Ming Dynasty type blues and whites, as you can see here. And pretty much, a lot of these kind of newer ones are marked on the bottom, so they're easy to spot. So if you do come across these, just make sure that some of these don't have spoons, some of these just, or ladles, I should say. So definitely look out for these different types of ones. Next up, we have this Bruno Magli. This is a black soft leather jacket. This is definitely a Brolo brand to look out for. Some of these jackets go for a pretty good amount of money. Bruno Magli. This is Italian, as you can see here. This is a size 46, and I must have been in a super hurry today, that day that I took these photos, because I normally don't take photos on doors. That was like something that we did many years ago, just to kind of churn through a massive amount of stuff. We just hang something on a door, take a photo, bada bing, bada boom. That's it. And as you can see here, still sold. I must have been in a real hurry this day when I took these photos. That's all I'm going to say. Or I probably had, the photo table was probably filled with so much stuff that it would have taken so much time to take everything off the photo table to get it set up so that I can put a mannequin and all that. That just goes to show you, it depends on, you can take really crappy photos and still still sell something. You don't really have to take the crazy amount of time to put things on a mannequin. It's sure they look nice and everything, but if you have like 100 pieces of clothes and try to put 100 pieces of clothes on a mannequin is going to be a nightmare. Sometimes you just throw it on a door with a nail. You just nail a nail in the door and just hang it like that. And that sold for 54. That sold for $74.99. Once again, I'm Chris, Thrift Shop Hustler. Hope you enjoyed this video. And we'll be doing some more what sold on videos, or what sold on eBay videos very soon. So definitely go down there, click the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, definitely go down there and click the like button. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and just say hello. And we'll see you next time. Take care.